Shayblade footage. And the man who had her arrested for shopping while black, badge gleaming, hands certain, not asking, watched himself on a screen in front of 240 witnesses. 7 minutes before she walked through that door, he was already there, already waiting. The room went the kind of quiet that has a sound to it. Then he stood up, pointed at her. In front of every camera in that chamber, he opened his mouth and said the one thing that destroyed everything he had left. A DA in the back row clicked open a briefcase she'd been holding for 8 months. It was never about one afternoon. It was never about one man. She wasn't wearing her badge that day. That was the only reason any of this happened. Captain Diana Wells, 22 years on the force. Walking into a jewelry store, sat away afternoon with a leather bag and a list that said silver bracelet. And someone had already decided what she was before she touched the door. But we'll get to that. First, you need to understand who Diana Wells was when she wasn't Captain Diana Wells. She was a woman who ironed her clothes on Friday nights because Saturday mornings should feel free, who kept a legal pad on her kitchen table and wrote things down in longhand because typing felt too fast for real thinking, who had learned, over the course of 22 years in rooms where people lied to her professionally, to notice everything and react to almost nothing. She was 46 years old. She had a left knee that talked to her in cold weather. She had a sister named Renee who called too often and meant well every single time. She had a nephew named Devin who was 21 studying business at Caldwell State and still called her Dee Dee. Had called her that since he was 4 years old and couldn't get his mouth around the full name. She'd never corrected him. She never would. She had a husband once, Marcus, gone 9 years now, died in the line of duty on a Tuesday morning in October, which was anything she had learned to carry the way you learn to carry anything heavy. Not without effort, not without cost, but steadily. One foot, then the other. She lived alone in a house on Clement Street with a legal pad on the kitchen table and a badge on the side table by the door. On this Saturday in November, she had taken the day off, and 11 weeks since her last real one. She'd counted, not obsessively, just the way a person counts things when they need to remind themselves that rest is not a character flaw. No uniform, no radio, no rank. Just Diana. Just a woman with a list and one errand to run. Devin had texted her that morning. 3 words. No rush, did he? She was still smiling at that when she pulled into the Caldwell Grand Mall parking structure at 1:47 in the afternoon. Second level. Spot near the elevator because her knee had opinions about long walks. She wasn't interested in hearing them today. She checked herself in the rearview mirror. Dark jeans, burgundy blouse. Her good leather bag, the one Renee had given her 3 birthdays ago, the one she only carried on days that weren't work. She looked like a woman running an errand. That was the point. Malt was busy the way malts get on Saturdays when the weather outside has turned cold and people need somewhere to be that has heat and the low hum of other people going about their lives. Families moved in clusters. A kid sprinted ahead of his mother and got called back with a sharp syllable that carried across the corridor. 2 old men sat on a bench near the fountain in the middle of what looked like a conversation that had been running for years and showed no sign of concluding. Diana liked malls. She never said that to anyone. But she did. Something about that particular noise. Not threatening, not demanding. Just the sound of ordinary life continuing, which was one of the sounds she had always liked best. She took the escalator to the 2nd floor. The lighting changed up here, softer. The stores on this level wanted you to slow down and stay longer than you'd planned. Sterling Ann sat between a candle shop and a place selling monogrammed everything. The window display had small spotlights on each piece, tasteful in the way that costs real money to achieve. She'd looked the store up the night before. Good reviews, real silver, not the kind that turns green by February, the kind of store Devin's girlfriend would actually appreciate. Diana pushed the door open. Cool air. Faint music, something instrumental playing low enough to create atmosphere without demanding attention. The store wasn't large. 4 display cases arranged in a rectangle, a wall of earrings on velvet boards near the back, 2 chairs for people who needed to sit while someone else tried things on. One other customer stood near the ring case, attended by a young male associate explaining something with patient detail. Behind the main counter stood the woman whose name tag said Grace. Diana noticed her the way she noticed most things, quickly, without making a production of looking. White woman, mid-40s. hair pulled back neatly. A smile arranged on her face that was doing most of the work her eyes weren't doing. And hands. Hands that moved to the edge of the counter the moment Diana stepped through the door, not reaching for anything, not straightening anything, just settling there, gripping just slightly. Diana had seen that before. She knew exactly what that meant. She chose not to care about it. Not today. Not on her Saturday. She had a list with one item on it. She was going to buy the bracelet and go home and call Devon, and that was going to be the whole of it. She moved to the left display case. A small S said bracelets. Here's what she did not know. 7 minutes and 14 seconds before Diana Wells pushed that door open, Sergeant Earl Briggs had stopped just outside Sterling and Company. Not to browse, not to check his phone. He stood at the entrance and looked through the glass at the people inside. Then he stepped in. Briggs was a big man, 51 years old, the kind of solid that used to be muscle and had settled since him something harder to define. His face had the look of a man who had made peace with being exactly where he was. Not ambitious, not particularly curious, just certain. The way certainty accumulates in a person who has spent long enough in a system that keeps telling them they're right. He worked mall security contract detail on Saturdays. Had been doing it 3 years. Same mall, same route, same stuff. It was listed on the department's approved side employment registry. Perfectly legal on paper. Briggs collected his regular department salary during the week and his contract fee on weekends, and Caldwell Grand Mall got what they were paying for. He stepped into Sterling and Company and said something to Grace Tillman. Low, not a greeting. More like a reminder of an arrangement already in place. Grace looked at him. Something moved across her face that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite compliance but lived in the neighborhood of both. He said a few more words. She nodded once. He stepped back out, positioned himself 12 feet down the corridor, half turned toward the directory map on the wall like a man with nowhere to be, and waited. Devon Wells had been sitting on a bench 20 feet away when this happened. Earbuds in, music going, phone propped on his knee facing the store because the angle caught the light in a way he found visually interesting. He was watching highlights from last night's game. He wasn't paying attention to Briggs. He wasn't paying attention to the store. He was 21 years old and had no intention of doing anything that afternoon, except waiting for his aunt to finish her errand so they could go get lunch. But his phone kept recording. Back inside Sterling and Company, Diana was leaning over the bracelet case when Grace Tillman appeared at her elbow. Too close. Not the close of someone wanting to help. The close of someone maintaining proximity for a different reason. Can I show you something specific? Her voice was practiced, but her eyes went to Diana's bag before they went to Diana's face, and Diana, who had spent 22 years reading exactly these kinds of signals, filed it without reacting. Just browsing, thank you. Grace did move away. Diana turned back to the cave, said third from the left. Silver, delicate links. A small butterfly charm with looked like crystal chips along the wings. Simple enough to wear every day, specific enough to mean something when you knew why it was chosen. That one's part of the secured collection. Grace's voice came slightly too fast. I'd need to open the case. That's fine. Diana kept her voice easy. I'd like to see it. A pause that lasted a beat longer than it should have. Of course. Grace moved to the register for the case keys, and Diana watched those hands again. Still shaking. Not badly. Just enough. She said nothing about it. The part of her brain that had never fully clocked out in 22 years went very quiet and very alert. She heard him before she saw him. Heavy footstep. A stride that moved through spaces without adjusting for other people. Carl Briggs walked in Sterling and Company and did not look at the jewelry and did not look at Grace. He looked at Diana. Ma'am. Diana kept her eyes on the display case. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the display. She straightened, slowly, turned to face him. He stood with his thumbs in his belt and his head tilted at a slight angle. The posture of a man who had rehearsed this scene enough times that he'd stopped thinking about it. Is there a problem? We've had some concerns about items in this section. He gestured at the case in a way that meant nothing specific. I need to check your bag. 1 full second of silence. No, Diana said. He blinked. The word hadn't landed where he'd expected. Excuse me? No, her voice was flat. The voice she used in interrogation rooms when she needed someone to understand that she wasn't in a hurry and didn't need them to be either. You don't have probable cause. You don't have reasonable suspicion based on anything I've done since I walked through that door. You have a feeling, and a feeling isn't sufficient. Briggs shifted his weight. Recalibrated. If you haven't taken anything, then the bag shouldn't be a problem. That's not how rights work. She held his gaze, and you know that. Some muffed him up behind his eyes, not uncertainty, more like a decision arriving. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be. What happened next happened the way real things happen, which is to say there was almost no warning and then it was already done. Briggs reached for her arm, not asking, not warning, reaching. 22 years of training fired before her brain finished testing the input, defensive tactics, threat assessment, the knowledge of exactly what a grab like this could become. Every instinct she had said move. She held herself still, because she was a captain. Because there were cameras in this store, and a customer in the corner, and a young woman behind the counter already braced for something. Because she had spent her entire career being the person who did escalate, who kept her head, who gave nobody ammunition they hadn't brought with them. She let him move her. He pulled her sideways, into the edge of the display case. Not hard enough to break glass. Hard enough to make clear who was deciding how this went. The case was cold against her shoulder. Hands, Briggs said. Low, private, like the rest of the store wasn't there. You're making a serious mistake. Her didn't shake. She noticed that, held onto it, hands behind your back. I have not stolen anything. I have not touched anything except with my eyes. I asked to see a bracelet and was waiting for the case to be unlocked. Last chance, he said. She did not move. A second guard appeared. She hadn't heard him come in. Young, uncomfortable in the way of someone who hasn't yet learned to look certain when he isn't. The two of them walked her out. Through the store, through the door, into the corridor where foot traffic slowed and people stopped moving, and someone said, "Oh my God," in the specific way it gets said when it means I am recording this right now. Diana walked with her chin up. They could have the moment. They could have the corridor and the stairs, and whatever story they were planning to write about this afterward. They could not have her posture. That was hers. She kept it. Devon saw her before she saw him. He was off the bench before she cleared the door. One earbud fell out. His phone was in his hand and still running. He looked at his aunt, then at the man holding her arm, then back at his phone. And his face moved through several things in the space of 2 seconds. Dee, stay back. Quiet and absolute. Keep recording. He stayed back. He kept recording. They took her to the parking structure entrance off the main corridor, baffled. Outside, cold air and exhaust and damp concrete. A second mall security officer had radioed ahead. He stood near the entrance beside one of Briggs's department colleagues, off duty, sidearm holstered, looking at Diana with the expression of a man who had not yet decided what he was looking at. Briggs started talking into his radio, and Diana's bag shifted. The strap caught on Briggs' and during the turn, the bag swung open, and the badge case Diana kept in the interior front pocket every day, on duty and off, because 22 years builds habits that don't switch off. The badge case slid partway out and caught the afternoon light. Gold, City of Caldwell Police Department, captain's rank. The department colleague saw it first. He went completely still. He said Briggs's name. Once, the way you say someone's name when you need them to stop before something becomes irreversible. Briggs looked down, looked at the badge, looked up at Diana. She watched something move through his face that she would think about later. Not remorse, not even embarrassment exactly. Something colder than both. A man doing arithmetic in real time and arriving at a number he didn't want. He stepped back, released her arm. Did not look at her, did not say a single word. Just stepped back and looked somewhere else like the last 4 minutes could be unmade by not acknowledging them. Diana straightened her blouse, picked up her bag, settled the strap back on her shoulder. She looked at the colleague. He was studying the ground. She looked at Briggs. "You need to document this," she said. "Every detail, because I will." Then she walked to her car, alone, steady, one foot in front of the other. Devon caught up to her at the elevator. He fell into step without speaking. Inside the elevator, he looked at her the way young people look at the adults they love when they're trying to figure out if that person is actually fine or just performing it. "Dee, I'm fine." "You're not." "I'm fine, Devon." She pressed the button for level 2. "I'm fine." He let that sit for 2 floors. "Then, I got all of it, from before you even went in." She looked at him. "I wasn't trying to get anything." His voice was careful. I was watching the game. But he went into that store, Dee Dee. He talked to the woman behind the counter, and then he came back out, and he stood there. 7 minutes before you. Walked through the door he was already set up and waiting. The elevator opened. Diana did not move. 7 minutes. Before she touched the case. Before she'd said a word to anyone. Before she'd done anything in that store except exist. He had gone in before her, had spoken to Grace, had positioned himself, had waited for whoever came through that door next, who fit the picture he'd already decided on. Don't post anything yet, she said. Devon made the face of a person who has already done the thing they're being told not to do and knows it, and feels genuinely bad about it, and also slightly doesn't. Devon. It went live. He looked at her with real apology, and the particular conflict of someone who believes they did the right thing for complicated reasons. I didn't think it through. How many? He checked his phone, looked up about 40,000. Diana closed her eyes, opened them. Get in the car. She drove him home first, made him eat something from what was in the refrigerator, told him to call Renee before Renee saw the video without any context and had a crisis alone. He called. She could hear Renee's voice from across the kitchen, not words, just the sound of a woman moving quickly through several emotions at once. Diana drove to her own house, changed her clothes, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with her legal pad and wrote everything to do after any significant encounter, date, time, location. Sterling and Company, second floor, Caldwell Grand Mall. 2:04 p.m. approximately. Sergeant. Carl Briggs, department side employment. Mall security contract. She wrote the 7 minutes down too, his exact timestamp to be confirmed from footage. Her hands were steady the whole time she wrote. She filed the internal complaint at 5:17 p.m. through the department's online system. Incident report, officer conduct, off-duty civilian counter, precise, thorough. Devon's contact information listed as a witness, with a note that recorded video evidence existed including footage captured before the incident began. Then she made herself eat dinner, toast and eggs, standing at the counter because she didn't feel like sitting down again. At 7:42, Vivian Shaw called. Vivian had been her friend for 18 years. They'd met at a City Bar Association fundraiser. Neither of them had wanted to attend and had spent most of the evening standing near the same tray of shrimp and talking quietly about everything except law. The friendship had built from there in the way real friendships do. Not through grand gestures or scheduled bonding, but through Sunday morning calls and dinners that got rescheduled 3 times and always happened eventually, and the specific comfort of a person who knows you well enough to skip the part where you explain yourself. I saw the video, Vivian said. No greeting. They were past greetings. Devon has a future in documentary filmmaking, Diana said. Diana, I know. How are you? Diana looked at her kitchen, at the toast crumbs on the counter, at her badge on the side table near the door where she'd set it when she came in. I'm holding, she said. I'm coming over tomorrow. 10 o'clock. We need to talk before they get ahead of you. It's Sunday. I'm aware of what day Sunday is. I'm a lawyer, not an astronomer. She hung up. Diana stood in the kitchen a while longer, looked at the badge. She thought about the 22 years that badge represented, the rookie year, the patrol years, the detective exam and the sergeant's exam and every step after, the years in precincts that hadn't wanted her, and the rooms where she'd had to prove herself to people who'd already decided what she was before she opened her mouth. Through her husband's funeral, when she'd stood at the graveside in her dress uniform and briefly considered laying the badge on the casket and decided against it because Marcus would have found that dramatic, and he would have been right. 22 years of believing in what it stood for, and today she had walked into a jewelry store as a private person, as a woman on her day off with a good leather bag and one item on her list, and had been grabbed and moved and walked out in front of witnesses. Not because of anything she'd done, not because of any behavior or word or action, because of what someone had decided she was the moment she came through the door. Her phone buzzed. Renee, a voice message. She'd listened to it in the morning. Then another buzz, unknown number, no name. You just dug your own grave, Captain. Diana looked at that sentence for a long time. Then she set the phone face down on the counter, rinsed her mug, and went to bed. She lay in the dark and thought about the 7 minutes. Not the glass case against her shoulder, not the faces in the corridor, not Ted Briggs stepping back and looking away like the last 4 minutes could be erased by refusing to look at them. The 7 minutes he had gone in before her, spoken to Grace, come back out and waited. He hadn't responded to anything Diana did because there was nothing for him to respond to yet. He had created the situation and positioned himself to act on it and then waited for the right person to come through the door. That wasn't impulse. That wasn't a bad day producing a bad call, as that wasn't even bias in the ordinary sense, a reflex, a judgment moving faster than it should. That was a system. And Diana Wells, who had worked inside a system for 22 years and had believed in it the way people believe in things they've paid for with their actual life, lay in the dark and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not just anger. Anger was familiar. Anger she could manage. This was recognition. She had seen this pattern before, from inside the building, from the other side of the desk, from the position of the person who read the report afterward and filed it and moved on. She had seen it and understood it intellectually, and had still somewhere in herself believed that wearing the badge meant something different, that belonging to the institution exempted you from what the institutions could do. It didn't. She was on the other side of that knowledge now, and it looked completely different from here. She was almost asleep when Devin texted, not a call. He understood, without being told, that sometimes the right kind of caring is the kind that doesn't need your voice. 7 million views now, Diddy. People are really angry, the good kind. A second text came a moment later, not deleting it, just so you know. Then a third. I got the whole thing, before you went in. Director. Whatever you need, I have it. Diana set the phone on the nightstand. 7 million. She thought about Vivian. Before they get ahead of you, she thought about the unknown number. You just dug your own grave. She thought about Grace Tillman's hands on that counter. Shaking. The hands of some son doing something they'd been instructed to do and were already, maybe just beginning, to understand the shape of what they'd agreed to. She thought about walking out of that mall with her chin up and her back straight, and not giving them one single additional thing beyond what they'd already taken. Sleep came slowly, but it came, and in the morning, everything began. The suspension letter arrived on a Tuesday. 43 days is after Briggs walked her out of that store. That was how Diana counted time now. Not by calendar dates. By distance from the moment, everything changed. The letter came by email. Not hand-delivered. Not called in. Just a notification in her inbox at 7:43 in the morning while she stood in her kitchen in her robe, holding a mug she hadn't drunk from yet, watching the local news scroll her own face across the bottom of the screen. She read it twice, set the mug down, read it a third time. Effective immediately, pending internal investigation into conduct unbecoming an officer. Allegations include failure to cooperate with security personnel, aggressive behavior toward a responding officer, creation of a hostile public environment, aggressive behavior. She stood there and thought about the display case, cold against her shoulder blade, the way Briggs had moved, certain and unhurried, not asking, not explaining. The way she had held herself absolutely still and let it happen, because she understood, with the understanding that comes from watching how these things evolve over 2 decades, that the moment she physically defended herself, the story would change. It would become a different story. A worse one. One where she was the problem and everything else disappeared into the background. She had held still's purpose, and they had written aggressive behavior anyway. She put the letter in a folder. Labeled the folder, filed it in the second drawer of her desk, behind everything else, in the order she filed everything. Then she got dressed and called Vivian. Vivian Shaw's office was on the 4th floor of the Caldwell Professional Building on Mercer Street. 11 years in that office. The wall of case files, organized by color-coded tabs, was the first thing you noticed when you walked in and kept drawing your eye back because it communicated something precise about the person who built it, without that person needing to say a word. Diana sat across from her and laid the suspension letter on the desk without speaking. Vivian read it. Her face didn't move. Vivian never let her face respond to something until she had decided what she thought about it, which was one of the reasons she was a very good lawyer and one of the primary reasons Diana had trusted her for 18 years. They moved fast, Vivian said finally. Yes, that means they're worried. Or it means they've done this enough times to be efficient at it. Vivian looked at her over the top of the page. Could be both. She set the letter down and folded her hands on top of it. Tell me everything, she said. Not the report you filed. Everything. What you saw, what you felt, the order things happened, the details that seemed too small to write down. so Diana told her, all of it. Grace's hands on the counter, the weight of Briggs's footstep, the way his department colleague had gone completely still when he saw the badge, not shocked exactly. More like a person who had just understood the arithmetic of a situation, and didn't like where it landed. The 7 minutes Devon had captured before she walked through the door. Vivian listened without interrupting once. When Diana finished, Vivian opened her laptop and turned the screen to face her. I've been pulling arrest records from Caldwell Grand Mall. 16 months back, the spreadsheet was meticulous in the way all of Vivian's work was meticulous. Clean columns, consistent formatting, every entry sourced and dated. 58 rows. Diana leaned forward. 58 arrests, Vivian said. All at or directly adjacent to the mall property. All resulting in charges. And every single one, resulting in plea agreements rather than trial. Plea agreements aren't unusual, Diana said, but she was already reading, already seeing it. No, but look at the last column. Diana looked. Plea agreement. Routed through the same company, Apex Supervision Group, Diana read aloud, private contractor. Handles court-ordered supervision, drug testing, mandatory check-ins. Charges fees directly to the people under their supervision. Monthly fees, testing fees, administrative processing fees. Vivian's voice stayed level throughout. On average, people in their program pay between $200 and $400 a month for supervision that is legally required, that they cannot exit without violating their probation terms and facing additional consequences. Diana sat slowly. An Apex Supervision Group, Vivian continued, is a subsidiary of Hargrove Capital Partners, which is the holding company that owns Caldwell Grand Mall. The office went quiet. They own the mall, Diana said, and they own the company that profits from every arrest made at the mall, or near it, or connected to it. So every person arrested becomes a revenue source. Yeah. Vivian closed the laptop. This is not a few officer operating with unchecked bias, Diana. This is not one bad actor running a side arrangement. This is a design system. Someone sat down and drew this up and decided it was worth building. Diana thought about the 58 rows. 58 people who had woken up on an ordinary day thinking they were just going somewhere. 58 mornings that had bent into something else without warning. 58 lives now organized around an arrest record and monthly fees they could not stop paying without risking worse. She thought about how many of those 58 had looked like her. She already knew. She didn't need the data to confirm it. I want the demographic breakdown, she said, already requested. Vivian paused. I expect it to show us exactly what we already know. Diana left Vivian's office at noon. Tobias Reed was waiting outside on the sidewalk. She'd looked him up after he first contacted her through the department's public records line 2 days earlier. 31 years old, Caldwell Courier, investigative desk, 3 years at the paper, 2 state press awards, 1 lawsuit from a city councilman that had been dropped after month 6 when the evidence became inconvenient for the councilman. The kind of record that belongs to someone who pushes until things move. He was leaning against the building with an actual paper notebook in his hand, not his phone. And he straightened when he saw her. Captain Wells. I'm on suspension. I don't have a title right now, as Wells then. He didn't perform warmth or apologize for the wait, just moved directly to it. I've been following the Caldwell Grand Mall arrest patterns for 7 months. Before your incident, I hit a wall about 3 months ago. Sources went quiet. Documents I'd formally requested stopped arriving. I think someone's in the city records system flagged my query pattern and passed the information along. What do you want from me? I want to know what you know, and I want to share what I know. He said it plainly. Because I think we have pieces that belong to the same picture, and separately, neither of us can see the whole thing. Diana looked at him for a moment, at the notebook, at the way he held himself, paying attention without needing anything back from her yet. Buy me coffee, she said, and don't talk slowly. I don't have patience for slow today. They sat in a diner 2 blocks from Vivian's building. Corner booth. Diana with her back to the wall, which was where she always sat, and had always sat, and would probably always sit for reasons she'd stopped examining. Tobias laid out what he had. Financial irregularities in Apex Supervision Group's state public filings, gaps in the documentation trail between fee collections and reported revenue. A former Apex employee, unnamed and protected, who had told him that arrest referrals from Caldwell Grand Mall came with internal priority flags pushing those cases to the front of the supervision assignment queue. Priority flags, Diana said, meaning those arrests were expected before the paperwork arrived, meaning someone at Apex knew they were coming, which means store coordination before the arrest, which means someone at the department was communicating with someone at Apex in advance. He turned a page in his notebook, and here's where I hit the wall. 3 months ago, I supplemental records request to the city clerk's office. Standard procedure. 48 hours later, my primary source went silent. A week after that, the documents I'd requested came back incomplete, missing exactly the pages that would have been useful. Someone with access saw your request, Diana said. That's what I believe. He looked at her steadily. Someone with supervisor-level access to the records system, Oz, saw my query and made a decision about it. Diana kept her face neutral. She was already thinking about who in the department had that kind of access. Thinking about it the way she didn't want to be thinking about it yet. I'm not your source, she said. I can't be on record about any of this. If my name is attached to something you publish before this is resolved, they'll use it to discredit the story before it can do anything. I'm not asking you to be on record. I'm asking you to help me understand what I'm looking at, which doors to try. She considered him for another moment. Here's a door, she said. Apex Supervision Group's state business registration documents. They filed for their Caldwell County license 3 months before the mall's arrest numbers started climbing. Pull the timeline. See if they were open for business before they had clients, or if the clients were already arranged before they opened their doors. Tobias was writing before she finished the sentence. She took the long way home, not planned. Her hands just found the familiar streets, and then the mall was there, the glass facade catching the afternoon light, the parking structure behind it, the sign above the Bunts entrance reading Caldwell Grand Mall, where every day is an event, which had always been a strange thing to write on a building and now struck her as almost surreal. She stopped at the light in front of the entrance and watched. A woman with a stroller moving toward the doors. A teenage boy getting a second look from the guard at the entrance before being allowed through. 2 older women walking past without anyone noticing them at all. The light changed. She drove. Samuel Obi called on a Wednesday evening. 26 years in the department. A broad-shouldered man whose face defaulted to serious and had to actively work at approachable, which, when he smiled, you understood it was something deliberately given. Diana had known him 14 years, had come up briefly under his supervision when she was a detective, had moved into her own trajectory but stayed close. He called her Wells, always had. She called him Obi, like everyone did. Heard about the suspension, he said. You doing all right? I'm working, she said. The answer she gave when she didn't want to answer what was actually being asked. I've been talking to some people. Quietly. There's noise internally. Some of it's supportive. He paused. Some of it isn't coming from a good place, I figured. Briggs has relationships that go back. People who know how to make things complicated when they want to. That doesn't surprise me. Just be careful. Who you trust, what you share, and with who. I'm always careful. Be more careful than that, he said. She noted the phrasing, the specific weight on those last 4 words. Filed it. Thanks, Obi. Stay sharp, he said, and hung up. Diana sat with the phone in her hand. There was something in his voice, slightly off-center from where it usually sat, like a picture hung almost straight that you keep almost not noticing until suddenly you do. She noticed. She didn't know what to do with it yet, so she put it away. The article came out on a Friday. She found it at 6:15 in the morning before she'd done anything except pick up her phone from the nightstand, which was a habit she knew was bad and had maintained for years regardless. The headline read, Suspended Caldwell Officers' History of Conduct Complaints, Raises Questions About Mall Incident. She read it without moving. The piece described, in language carefully calibrated to stop just short of direct accusation, a series of internal complaints filed against Captain Diana Wells spanning 11 years. It quoted an unnamed department source. It used phrases like pattern of behavior, history of interpersonal friction with colleagues, questions about judgment in high-pressure situations. It did not name who had provided the complaints. It did not note that none of the cited complaints had resulted in formal discipline of any kind. It did not mention that 2 of the specific dates referenced corresponded exactly with periods when Diana had been on approved leave, meaning any complaints filed during those windows were either fabricated or deliberately misdated. Nobody had apparently thought to ask about any of that before publishing. Diana put the phone face down on the nightstand, looked at the ceiling. Her first response was clean and hot, anger moving in a direct line. Her second response came from a different place. 22 years of turning evidence over until she understood what she was actually holding. Someone had accessed her internal personnel file, had gone through her record looking for the thinnest spots and handed them to a journalist who either hadn't checked them or hadn't wanted to. That someone had access to department records at a level that allowed them to pull personnel files without triggering a flag. That someone had moved quickly. Within days of her suspension, she got it up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table and thought. She called Vivian at 7. "I saw it," Vivian said, before Diana spoke. "The dates are wrong on at least 2 of the cited complaints." "I know. I've already formally requested your complete personnel file under your employment rights. We'll have documentation of the discrepancies within 48 hours. "But Diana." "I know," Diana said. "A correction that runs on page 12 doesn't undo a headline. The story is already out there doing its work. I'm not the wronged party anymore. I'm the complicated case. Everything I say from this point gets filtered through that frame." Vivian was quiet for a moment. This was one of the things Diana had always valued most about her. The complete absence of reassurance offered before it was warranted. "You're right," Vivian said simply. "This is what they do when they can't fight the facts. They rewrite the narrator. So what do? We build something they can't rewrite. Not just your case, the whole system. All 58 arrests, the money, the coordination, the people connecting the pieces." Vivian paused. "I need more time, Diana." "How much?" 2 weeks, maybe a few days more." Diana looked out the window at the street, the ordinary Saturday morning of it, a neighbor's dog making its loop of the yard, the same loop it made every morning, indifferent to everything. "I can hold," she said. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon. She was at her desk, working through the documents Vivian had sent when she heard it. Side door, off the kitchen. The one that people who actually knew her used. She looked through the glass. Samuel Obi, tall, wearing civilian clothes, holding a manila envelope against his chest with both hands the way you hold something that has weight beyond its physical contents. His face had the look of a man who had made a decision and crossed to the other side of it and was now living with the view from there. She opened the door. He stepped inside, didn't look around the kitchen, didn't accept the silent offer toward the coffee pot, just stood. She closed the door. She looked at S and saw it immediately. Whatever this was, it was costing him. Not the ordinary cost of a hard conversation. Something that had been accumulating for a long time and was now due. "Sit down, Obi." He sat at her kitchen table. She sat across from him, and she waited, because this was the kind of thing that needed to find its own way out, even when your patience had been running thin for weeks. "I owe you the truth," he said. She kept her face still. "I told Briggs about your investigation." He said it directly. "What you'd found. What you were looking at." He paused. "Who you'd spoken to." The kitchen was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum. "When?" Diana said. 3 weeks ago. The day you told me what you were starting to see in the arrest data." He didn't look away from her. "I went to him the same day." "Why?" Not a real question. She had a sense of why. She needed to hear him say it. 11 years ago, Obi said, I was involved in a shooting. A man I believed was reaching for a weapon. He wasn't. He was reaching for his phone. He survived, but my incident report didn't match what the dashcam footage showed. I knew that when I wrote it. I filed it anyway. I told myself I'd seen what I'd seen, and the angle was off, that the camera hadn't caught the full picture. But Briggs found it. He was reviewing archived incident files 4 years ago, looking for something unrelated. Someone in records had pulled the old files for a routine audit, and Briggs saw them before they were refiled. He came to me privately afterward, not making threats exactly, just making sure I knew that he knew. Obi's jaw moved, and then every so often, he would ask me for something. Small things at first. Which cases were being flagged for internal review, which supervisors were making certain kinds of requests. And then I started asking about the mall arrest patterns, Diana said, and I told him, yes. She stood up, walked to the window. Stood looking out at the backyard, the November sky going gray above us. He's been doing this for 4 years. Yes. You gave him information about an active investigation. Yes. She turned around. And you gave him my name, the people I'd talked to. Yes. She looked at him across the kitchen. At 14 years of trust sitting at her table with a manila envelope and a face that had stopped pretending. What's in the envelope? Everything I have on Briggs. He slid it toward her. Records of every conversation he initiated, dates, content, what he asked for each time, and he stopped. The original dashcam footage from 11 years ago, I kept a copy. I don't know why I kept it. I just never deleted it. Diana looked at the envelope. You're handing me the thing that ends your career. Most likely, yes, your pension. I know what it means. You could face criminal exposure. I've thought about all of it. Then why? Obi looked at her, and what she would remember later wasn't the words he said. It was what was in his face when he said them. The specific exhaustion of a person who has been carrying something in the wrong direction for a very long time and has finally decided to stop. Because I've been doing this job for 6 years, he said, and if I sit across from you and stay quiet while Briggs uses me to dismantle what you're trying to do, then what was any of it for? Any of it? The kitchen was quiet. Diana looked at the envelope, looked at him, looked at the 14 years between them, which contained a great deal that was real and one thing that wasn't. I'm going to contact DA Patricia Holt's office, she said. She's been watching Apex's name appear in plea documents, and she's been unhappy about it. If you cooperate fully, give her everything, disclose everything, she may be able to offer you some protection in whatever process follows. I can't make that promise. That's hers to make, he nodded. But I'll tell her the truth about what was done to you, Diana said. What Briggs used and how long he used it, that's mine to give and I'm giving it. Obi looked at his hands on the table. Diana, he said. Her name like a sentence by itself. I know, she said. Now tell me every conversation Briggs ever started with you. Every request, every detail you can remember. I need to write it down while it's clear he talked for 80 minutes. She filled nearly a full legal pad. She called Tobias that evening from her back porch, standing in the cold because she needed the open air of it. My office was broken into last night, he said. No setup, just the fact. Diana's hand tightened on the phone. Are you all right? I wasn't there. I'm fine. He kept his voice level. They took a hard drive from my desk. He paused. But not the right one. I moved everything to an encrypted server 4 days ago. I had a feeling something was coming. What they took is a backup from several months ago. There's nothing on it they can use. They don't know that. No. But here's what they left without meaning to. Building security camera caught partial footage. The person covered their face, but not completely. On the way out, angle shifted. You can see the lower half. Department-issue boots. And a uniform cuff visible at the wrist when they reached for the door handle. Diana stood in the cold of her backyard and said nothing for a moment. Ms. Wells, Tobias said. Whoever is inside this, they know what we're building before we build it. I know. Then we need to move. Not yet. Diana watched the sky above her fence. Not until we have everything together and in the right room. The one piece released at a time is one piece they can isolate and discredit at a time. We need all of it simultaneously, in front of people who can act on it. What's your timeline? I need DA Holt engaged and ready before anything goes public. Give me 2 weeks. Tobias was quiet for a moment. I can hold that, he said. Use the number you reached me on tonight, Diana said. Nothing through your regular channels. Understood. He paused. How are you doing, actually? She thought about it honestly before answering. I'll manage, she said. She went inside, made tea, sat at her kitchen table with Obi's testimony written on her legal pad and Vivian's spreadsheet open on her laptop and the manila envelope from Obi on the corner of the desk. 58 rows. 58 people who had gone somewhere ordinary on an ordinary day and had come out of it paying monthly fees to a company that was owned by same people who owned the place that had set the whole thing moving. A circle so clean it almost had an elegance to it, an ugliness that had been mistaken for elegance. She thought about all the people who had been positioned to see this and had chosen the easier path. Some because they were afraid, some because they were being pressured, some because looking away had never cost them enough to make looking worth it. She closed the laptop, sat in the quiet of her kitchen. Her phone rang at 8:47 in the evening. Unknown number, no name attached. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Captain Wells, a woman's voice, low and moving fast. The rhythm of someone who had made a decision and was getting through it before the decision could reverse itself. My name is Grace Tillman. I work at Sterling and Company. Diana went very still. Or I worked there. Grace corrected herself. I know I have no right to call you. I know that. But I need to say something to you directly, not through anyone else, just to you. I'm listening. I didn't know you were a police officer. The words came quickly. When it happened, I didn't know. I'm not saying that to make myself feel better or to ask you to forgive me. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and I think you should have the true version. What did you know? Diana said, carefully, not hard, not soft, just clear. Silence. Then I knew we were supposed to watch certain customers. That was the word they used. Certain. Report anything that could suggest a theft risk. I knew what certain meant. Grace's voice was quieter now. I'm not going to pretend I didn't understand what I was participating in. Why are you calling me? Because I recorded a meeting. 6 months ago, my manager running an orientation for new floor staff. He described the protocol. The language was careful, but the meaning was plain. And I kept the recording because I felt sick about it, and I didn't know what to do with it. Grace stopped, and then I watched what happened to you on the news. I've been sitting with this for 2 weeks and I just can't sleep. Diana leaned forward. Miss Tillman, I'm going to give you a name, Vivian Shaw. I'll contact her tonight, so she knows to expect your call. You're going to call her tomorrow morning at 9, and you're going to bring that recording. A long silence. Can you do that? Diana said. Yes, Grace said. I think I need to. You already know you need to, Diana said. That's why you called tonight. Grace was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not sufficient. It's a start, Diana said. Bring the recording tomorrow, 9 o'clock. She hung up. She sat in her quiet kitchen. She thought about Grace's voice. The guilt in it that wasn't performed, that was the real thing. The weight of a person who had been part of something they couldn't fully unchoose and had been sitting alone with that for 6 months. She thought about Obi at her kitchen table with the manila envelope. She thought about Tobias, standing in an office that had been searched, she calling from a different number. She thought about Devin on that bench with his phone pointed at the store because the light looked interesting. None of them had done everything right. Obi had made a decision that had cost people something real and had lived with that for 4 years before he stopped. Grace had followed instructions she understood the meaning of and had kept a recording she hadn't known how to use. Devin had live-streamed something before he understood what he was holding. And yet here they all were, each of them, in their own way, choosing the harder thing when it mattered. She looked at her legal pad, at the 80 minutes of Obi's testimony in her handwriting, at the spreadsheet still glowing on her laptop, at the envelope on the corner of the desk. The truth was close now. She could feel the shape of it. Not hope exactly. Something with more structure than hope. The particular certainty of a person who has gathered enough pieces to see what they're building and understand that the building is nearly done. In 2 weeks, she would walk into a room and say what was true. And this time, there would be nothing they could do to stop it. 6 weeks after Briggs walked her out of that store, Grace Tillman sat in Vivian Shaw's office with both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She'd arrived 8 minutes early. Vivian mentioned that to Diana later, on the phone, and Diana understood immediately why it mattered. Arriving early to the hardest conversation of your life is its own kind of courage. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. Just the kind that shows up before it's required and sits down and waits. Diana wasn't in the room. Vivian's call, and the right one. Grace needed to speak without the weight of Diana's presence bending every word toward apology instead of evidence. So Diana sat in her car in a parking structure 2 blocks away and waited and tried, without much success, not to think about how much she hated waiting. Vivian called at 10:22. She has a recording, Vivian said, clear audio. Her manager, a man named Dwight Sears, running an orientation session for new floor staff 6 months ago. He uses the phrase high-risk demographic 3 times. He describes the bag check protocol as a standard loss prevention measure. He references the arrangement with mall security by name. Does he name Briggs? Not directly. He says our security contact, but the context removes any ambiguity. Vivian paused, Diana. This is the piece we've been missing. This puts the protocol inside the building. On record, 6 months before your incident. It's not Briggs running a personal operation. It's coordinated organizational policy. Diana looked at the ceiling of the parking structure. Concrete and pipes and a water stain in the shape of nothing. How is she? Scared, Vivian said. But she stayed. She answered every question I put to her. She asked me twice if she was doing the right thing. What did you tell her? That people doing the wrong thing don't usually ask. Diana sat with that a moment. Get everything documented today, she said. Signed statement, the recording transferred to a secure location, copies in 3 separate places before tonight, and call D. Holt's office. Tell her we're ready to meet. Already in motion, Vivian said. Holt can see us Monday morning. Patricia Holt's office was on the 3rd floor of the Caldwell County Courthouse building. Diana had done her research before the Monday meeting, 9 years as DA, known in the legal community for moving slowly and landing hard. The kind of prosecutor who didn't open a case until she could close it completely. Vivian had dealt with her office before and described her without decoration. Careful, thorough, final. The desk looked like a working desk rather than a displayed one. Stacked files. 2 coffee cups at different stages of empty. A legal pad covered in handwriting that went in 3 directions across the page. The desk of someone who thought Barber didn't clean up between thoughts because the thoughts kept coming. Holt read for 11 minutes without speaking. Diana sat across from her and did not fill the silence. She'd learned a long time ago that the impulse to fill silence was almost always about managing your own discomfort rather than serving any actual purpose. She let Holt read. Finally, Holt set the documents down. How long have you been building this? 3 weeks of active documentation on my end, Diana said. The arrest record analysis goes back 16 months. My attorney pulled that independently before I was involved, and the recording from the store employee. 6 months old, voluntarily provided. She came forward without being asked. Holt took her glasses off, cleaned them on the hem of her jacket, put them back on. A habit, Diana guessed, not a stall. I know the name Apex Supervision Group, Holt said. Their name appeared on plea documents at a rate that made me uncomfortable about 8 months ago. I raised it internally and was told the matter was under review. Diana waited. It has apparently been under review ever since. Holt's voice was dry in the way of someone who has been patient about something for a long time and has used up most of the patience. Someone slowed it. There's a meaningful difference between burying something and slowing it. Burying leaves evidence of burial. Slowing just looks like process. She tapped the documents on her desk. I need the complete financial documentation, the payment structure between Hargrove Capital and Apex. Every transfer, every date, every account. Tobias Reed has it, Diana said. He's been building the financial case for 7 months. He's prepared to provide everything to your office before his story publishes. He wants the charges filed first, and the department officer, Lieutenant Samuel Obie. Diana said the name without hesitation. He's prepared to cooperate fully, in complete disclosure. Every communication with Briggs, everything he provided, all dates and all content. He's exposing himself to significant professional and legal consequences. He knows that. Diana kept her hands still on the arms of the chair. I'd ask that his cooperation be considered in whatever process follows. He was a victim of this system before he became part of how it operated. Briggs held something over him for 4 years. That context belongs in the complete picture. Holt looked at her over the glasses. You're advocating for the man who undermined your own investigation. I'm advocating for an accurate picture, Diana said. If we hold accountable only the people at the bottom of the pressure chain, we haven't actually dismantled anything. We've replaced some parts and left the mechanism intact. Holt held her gaze for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and made a note on the legal pad. I'll need 2 weeks to prepare a file as properly, she said. A proceeding involving active department personnel has to be clean from the first step. No procedural gaps. Nothing that gives them room to shift focus later. 2 weeks, Diana said. Can you hold that? Diana thought about the 11 weeks before any of this started. The 43 days since that Saturday. The legal pad on her kitchen table and the badge on the side table by the door and all the weight she'd been carrying in the space between. I've been holding, she said. She told Obie that evening. Not in any building connected to the department. Not on any phone linked to official records. She drove to the diner on Clement Street, the one they'd eaten lunch in maybe 100 times over 14 years, with its vinyl booths worn soft at the edges and its pie case by the door and the waitress named Dot, who called everyone honey without ever appearing to think about it. Obie was already there when she arrived. He looked like a man who had been doing a great deal of quiet sitting and thinking. The kind of thinking that doesn't resolve itself but settles gradually into the lines of a face. Diana slid into the booth across from him. D. Holt will offer protection if you cooperate fully, she said. Complete disclosure. Everything on record. Nothing held back. She's not promising immunity. She's promising consideration. He looked at his coffee. And you, he said. What are you offering? I already told her the context, Diana said. What Briggs held over you. How long it went on. That you came to me and handed over the documents before anyone asked you to. She paused. I can't promise you an outcome, Obi. That's not mine to give. But I'll tell the truth about what you did when it mattered. That's what I have. He was quiet for a while. Dot came by and refilled both cups without being asked. Called them both honey. Moved on. I've been a cop for 26 years, Obi said. I know. I believed in it. I know you did. Do you still? He looked at her directly. The question had real weight behind it. The weight a person puts into a question when they need the answer to come from somewhere more reliable than their own head right now. Diana thought about it honestly. Not the reflexive answer, not the institutional one. The true one, which was the one she'd been working toward for 6 weeks without quite having the words for it full till now. I believe in what it's supposed to be, she said. I've believed in that my whole career. The idea of it. Showing up for people. All people. Not the ones who look like you or live where you live. Everyone. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I'm less patient than I used to be with the gap between what it's supposed to be and what it sometimes becomes. I used to think that gap was workable, that the institution would shift if enough people inside it pushed. And now I think it shifts when people make it shift, when they pay the cost of making it shift. She looked at him across the table. That's what you're doing right now. That's exactly what this is. Oba was quiet for a moment. I'll call Holt's office tomorrow morning, he said. Good. He picked up his coffee, set it back down, other drinking. Diana, he said, her name by itself, carrying everything that didn't fit into other sentences. I know, she said. Now eat something. You look like you haven't eaten since Thursday. He almost laughed. Not quite, but the closest thing to it in weeks, and she could see it, and it was enough. The 2 weeks moved with the weight that weeks carry when you're holding something and can't set it down even briefly. Vivian filed 3 supplemental legal motions. Tobias submitted his complete financial documentation to Holt's office under a formal press cooperation agreement that protected his publication timeline. On a Saturday afternoon, Devon came over, and they sat at Diana's kitchen table together and confirmed the timestamp on the original footage frame by frame. 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Devon sat back after they confirmed the number. He decided before you got there, Devon said. Yes. Devon looked at her sideways, the look he used when he'd been holding something and had decided to say it. Do you actually understand that? He said it carefully, not accusing, genuinely asking, that nothing you did made this happen. You could have come in an hour later, worn different clothes, carried a different bag, didn't matter. He'd already made the decision before you were even there. I know, Diana said. Devon was on to quiet for a moment. Do you know it, or do you know it the way people say they know things before they've really let it in yet? She looked at him. He was 21 years old and had been paying more attention than she'd tracked. I'm working on letting it in, she said. That's the truest thing I can tell you right now. He nodded slowly. Sat with that. That seemed like enough. Renee came over on the Thursday before the hearing. She brought food the way she always brought food when she didn't know what else to bring, which Diana had always found both completely predictable and exactly right. Chicken and rice and cornbread from the place on Hadley Street that Diana never remembered to order from herself. They ate at the kitchen table. Renee didn't mention the case, didn't ask about the hearing or Holt or Briggs or any of it. She talked about Devon's ongoing roommate situation, which apparently involved a shared refrigerator and deeply held convictions about labeled leftovers. She talked about a book she'd started on the bus that turned out to be considerably better than its cover deserved. She talked about the tree in her backyard that had finally surrendered a branch onto the fence and what the neighbor had said about it, which had led to a longer conversation than either of them expected, and which had ended surprisingly well. Ordinary things, the texture of a life continuing regardless. Diana ate more than she'd eaten in a week and didn't notice until she was scraping the bottom of the container. You needed 2 hours of not thinking about it, Renee said, stating it rather than asking. Yes, Diana said. I did. Good. Renee stacked the empty containers neatly. That's what I'm for. At the door, she hugged Diana, long and without ceremony. The kind of hug that isn't asking for anything and doesn't need anything back. Just presence. "You've already done the hard part," Renee said quietly, close to her ear. "Tomorrow is just the part where everyone else catches up to what you already know." The night before the hearing, Diana didn't sleep. Not from fear, not from anxiety in the ordinary sense. She lay in bed until nearly 2 in the morning and then accepted that sleep wasn't coming and got up. Made tea. Sat at the kitchen table with the legal pad in front of her and wrote nothing on it. Just sat with the pen in her hand and let the night be quiet around her. She thought about Marcus. He would have sat in the chair across from her at this same table. Would have made the tea without asking if she wanted any, because he'd learned early that when she was like this, she always wanted tea and never thought to make it herself. He wouldn't have said anything particularly profound, because he'd known her well enough to understand that what she needed wasn't wisdom. It was just another person in the room, available without requiring anything. She missed him the way she'd learned to miss him over 9 years. Not like an open wound anymore, more like a steady low for frequency. The absence of a sound you've stopped consciously registering, but would notice immediately if it came back. She got up, went to the side table by the door, picked up the badge, held it in both hands. 22 years ago, she had received this in a formal ceremony, had stood through the whole thing with her back straight and her chin up while her mother cried audibly in the third row. She had believed in what it represented, without qualification, without the protective layer of knowing how complicated it could get. She still believed in what it represented. What the past 6 weeks had done was not shake that belief. What they'd done was strip away the comfortable things that had been attached to it. The idea that wearing the badge meant the institution protected you in return. That belonging to the system meant the system claimed you as its own. That faith in the institution was the same thing as the institution deserving that faith. None of that was true. But the original belief, the one that lived underneath all of that, the belief she'd carried before she had language for it, that one was still there. Intact. Possibly more clear for having been stripped of the comfortable wrapping. The badge was supposed to mean you showed up for people. All of them. And when the systems around you started moving the wrong direction, the badge was supposed to mean you said something about it, did something about it. Even when the cost of that came directly out of your own life. That was the whole of it. She'd always known that. Witched to put the badge down, finished her tea, went back to bed at 3:15, and this time she slept and did not dream. The Caldwell City Council chamber held 240 seats. Diana arrived through the side entrance with Vivian at 9:45 minutes before the session was scheduled to open. Every seat was already full. People stood along the back wall and both sides of the room. Council staff moved through the corridor outside, managing an overflow situation they had not been prepared for and were handling with varying degrees of composure. She wore her captain's uniform. She had stood in front of her closet for 5 minutes before deciding. Civilian clothes would say she was there as a private person seeking remedy for a wrong done to her. The uniform said something different. It said she had not accepted the story they had tried to write about her. It said she was still exactly what she had been before any of this started, and she had not changed that, and they were not going to. She put it on. The room registered her arrival the way rooms do when someone walks in that people have been waiting for. A current moving outward from the door. Heads turning. The quality of the noise in the room shifting perceptibly. Devin was in the third row. He gave her a small nod. He'd been there since 8 o'clock that morning. He'd texted her earlier, had saved the seat beside him while understanding she'd be at the front. His O-phones was in his hand. Tobias stood near the press section with his paper notebook. He caught her eye, nodded once. Grace Tillman sat near the back in a blue jacket that looked her best one. Small and slightly pale and present, their eyes met briefly across the full length of the room. Grace looked away first, but she was there. She had come. That was the thing. Diana turned toward the front of the chamber. Carl Briggs sat the witness section to the right of the council dais. Civilian clothes, arms crossed. The posture of a man gripping a version of events and holding it as tightly as his hands would allow while he saw her walk in, his arms crossed tighter. Council chair opened the session at 10:03. Reviewed procedures, no DA Holt's office present in an official capacity. explained that testimony was being recorded and that all parties would have opportunity to do statements made. Diana was called first. She walked to the podium, looked out at 240 people and the cameras along the back wall and the council members in a row on the raised dais above her, took a breath, and began. She did not start with them all. She started with the 58. Vivian had prepared clean documentation packets for each council member in the press section. Diana laid out the data without ornamentation. 58 arrests in 16 months at or adjacent to Caldwell Grand Mall. The demographic breakdown, which was exactly as stark as she and Vivian had both known it would be. The plea agreement rate. The pipeline into Apex Supervision Group. The financial structure connecting Apex to Hargrove Capital Partners, the holding company that owned the mall. She spoke without elevation in her voice, without reaching for emotion. She let the numbers carry what they carried because numbers, when presented honestly and in full, have their own weight and don't need assistance. Then she put up Devon's footage. Vivian had arranged the screen 2 days before. The clip ran 4 minutes, time-stamped and unedited, exactly as DeForstein Holder recorded it on a Saturday afternoon when he was watching a game and not paying particular attention to anything in front of him. 7 minutes and 14 seconds before Diana walked through the door of Sterling and Company, Carl Briggs walked in, spoke to Grace Tillman, received a nod, walked back out, took his position in the corridor 12 feet from the entrance and waited. 240 people watched in complete silence. Diana and the silence hold for a moment. Then she played Grace's recording. Dwight Sears's voice filled the chamber. 6 months prior. The staff orientation. High-risk demographic. The bag check protocol. Our security contact. An arrangement described in language carefully chosen to sound procedural, to sound like retail practice, to sound like nothing worth noticing or questioning. When it ended, Diana looked at the council members. This is not a story about one officer making a poor judgment call, she said. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not an isolated afternoon. This is a system, built deliberately, designed to generate arrests from a specific population, to funnel those arrests into a private revenue stream, and to protect itself from examination by controlling the people best positioned to examine it. She paused and let that sit. I am standing here today not because what happened to me was unique. I am standing here because I have something they could not make disappear afterward. She put her hands flat on the podium. The 58 people in that data did not have a captain's badge in their bag. They had the same rights I had. The same right to walk into this mall on an ordinary day and be treated like a citizen of this city. And they were not treated that way. She stepped back from the podium. She was moving toward her seat when it happened. Briggs had been sitting too still for too long. She'd recognized it from across the room, the specific stillness of a man holding himself in check through sustained effort, and she knew from experience that kind of stillness has a limit. He reached his. You don't have the right. His voice came from the witness section, loud and uncontrolled in a room that had been very quiet. He was on his feet. You don't have the right to stand up there, and his voice cracked on the last word, which seemed to fuel rather than check the anger. You're on suspension. You're standing here conducting a case against your own department, against people who have given years of their careers to this city, on the basis of a personal grievance and footage shot by Sergeant Briggs, the council chair sharp.
She's running to your seat,
He pointed at Diana, directly. In a room with 240 witnesses and cameras running along the back wall. She's been building this since the moment she decided she was above cooperating with a legitimate Sergeant Briggs. The council chair again harder. You will sit down or you will be removed. Those are the only 2 options in front of you right now. Let her answer for it. Still pointing. Still standing. What gives her the right to come in here and destroy people's careers and reputations based on a 30-second video and the word of a disgruntled... That is enough. Not the council chair. DA Patricia Holt had risen from her seat along the side wall of the chamber. She was not loud. She had never needed to be. She had the authority of someone who has always understood that volume is for people uncertain they'll be heard. Sergeant Briggs, he turned. I want you to understand that every word you have spoken the past 2 minutes has been recorded and will be entered into the evidentiary record of my office's investigation. She held his gaze. Everything you just said will be considered in the context of the formal conduct investigation my office opened this morning into your activities over the past 6 months. Briggs stared at her. You are not required to say anything further. Holt's voice didn't change pitch or pace. I would advise strongly against it. The chamber was absolutely still. Briggs's mouth closed. He sat down. Holt turned to the couch chair and continued in exactly the same measured tone. I'd like the council to know that my office will be issuing formal charges this afternoon against Sergeant Carl Briggs, Dwight Sears of Sterling and Company, and 3 executives of Hartgrove Capital Partners. The charges include conspiracy, civil rights violations, and operating a racketeering enterprise under applicable state statutes. She lifted her folder. I have the complete documentation here if the council wishes to review it before this session concludes. The chamber came apart at the seams. Diana stood in it, the noise and the cameras pivoting and the council members leaning urgently toward each other, and Briggs being approached by 2 officers who had placed themselves near the witness section, not dramatically, not rushing, just quietly there and ready. Devon was beside her. She hadn't seen him move. He was just suddenly there at her elbow, close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him standing next to her. This 21-year-old who had been watching him on a Saturday afternoon with his phone pointed at a storefront for no particular reason and had accidentally become the person who changed everything. She looked at the room, at all of it, at the 58 rows of data sitting on every council member's desk. At Grace near the back, still in the blue jacket. At Tobias in sanction, finally writing in his paper notebook with real purpose. At the cameras that were going to carry this out of this room and into the world before the day was over. She felt something she would spend time later trying to name, precisely because she wanted to get it right. Not triumph. Triumph was too clean, too self-contained, too much about the person feeling it. Not simply relief either, something more like the feeling of having carried something a very long distance in the right direction and finally arriving at the place where other people could take it from here. The weight of the carrying is over. What comes next will have its own weight. But that weight will be shared now, and that is entirely different. Briggs was escorted out of the chamber. He walked without struggling. He passed within 10 feet of Diana and kept his eyes on the floor ahead of him, and she let him go because there was nothing left between them that words would add to what the evidence had already said. D. Holt approached after the immediate noise settled into something more organized. We'll need your full deposition next week, she said. Complete account beginning to end. You'll have it. Holt looked at her for a moment without the professional neutrality she'd maintained throughout the session. Something more direct in it. What you built here, she said, without access to department resources, while under suspension, while being actively undermined from inside the institution. She paused. That's not a small thing. It's what I've been trained to do. You did it when it would have been considerably easier to stop, Holt said. That's a different thing from training. She extended her hand. I'll be in touch. Diana shook it. She found Grace Tillman in the corridor out to the chamber, sitting on a bench in the blue jacket with her hands folded in her lap. The expression of someone who has done something irreversible and is still figuring out what the other side of it feels like. Diana sat beside her. They were quiet for a moment while the corridor moved around them. People coming out of the chamber in clusters, conversations starting, phones going up. Is it over? Grace asked. The beginning of it is, Diana said. The rest takes time. Will there be legal consequences for me? You cooperated voluntarily and provided evidence that established as coordinated policy rather than individual conduct. Diana kept her voice even. Vivian will walk you through your specific situation. But the people who designed the policy are the ones facing the charges. You were an employee following instructions you were handed. Grace nodded, looked at her hands. I knew, she said quietly. I kept telling myself I didn't fully understand what I was participating in. But I knew what the word certain meant when they used it. I knew who they meant. Diana didn't offer her a way out of that. She'd heard enough performed innocence in 22 years to know the difference. Real guilt doesn't ask to be absolved. It just sits there being what it is and waiting to see what you do with it. But she didn't leave it there either. You called me on a Thursday night when no one was making you, Diana said, dull. You came here today. You brought that recording that you'd been keeping for 6 months. She looked at Grace directly. You knew, and when it finally mattered, you did something with the knowing. That's not nothing. That's the thing that actually changes how this ends. Grace's eyes went wet. She blinked it back. I have a daughter, she said. She's 20. I kept thinking about what I would say to her if she ever found out I'd stayed quiet. Sometimes that's what finally does it, Diana said. Not the grand reason. Just one person you don't want to have to explain yourself to. Grace almost smiled, small and real. Call Vivian tomorrow, Diana said. She'll walk you through everything that comes next. She found Vivian near the press section managing 3 simultaneous conversations with the calm efficiency of someone for whom this was simply a busy Tuesday. Vivian held up one finger, finished a sentence into her phone. Hung up. The story breaks tonight, she said. Tobias's piece runs with the complete financial documentation. 2 other outlets are publishing simultaneously. By morning, it's national. Good. The department has already released a preliminary statement. Vivian's voice carried a precise dryness. They're describing it as an isolated incident involving an individual officer who has been removed pending investigation. Diana said nothing. That narrative has until tomorrow morning, Vivian said. Once the financial documentation is public, it becomes impossible to maintain. She looked at Diana steadily. You should expect a reinstatement offer within the week. They'll want to get in front of what's coming. What are we asking for? Vivian's voice shifted into its negotiating register. Formal retraction of the suspension notation from your personnel file. A written acknowledgement that your conduct at the time of the incident was consistent with your rights as a private citizen. A formal departmental review of site employment arrangements involving active officers. And a seat on the internal reform committee that Holt's investigations is going to require them to establish. The committee seat, Diana said. That's the one. I know, Vivian said. That's why I'm setting it for last that in the sequence. Get it in writing before I set foot back in the building. Give me 2 days. Obi called that evening. I watched the session online, he said. His voice had something in it she hadn't heard from him in a long time. Not ease exactly. The absence of a particular pressure. The sound of something that had been constant long enough to become background finally stopping. How are you doing? I'm all right. He meant it. She could tell. I told Holt's office this started the formal interview process. Hard, he said, the right kind of hard. She knew exactly what that meant. I told them everything, he said. The dash cam footage, every conversation with Briggs, what I gave him when I gave it, what he asked for. Nothing held back. Good. Diana. His voice shifted. When you went to Holt on my behalf before any of this was, you didn't owe me that. Yes, I did, she said simply. Why? Because the truth about what was done to you belongs in the same picture as everything else. The same system that targeted the 58 used you too. It found the pressure point and leaned until you couldn't move. That's not a separate story. It's the same story. She paused. And if I only told the part of the story that was convenient for me, I'd be doing the same thing they did. Obi was quiet for a long moment. It's going to be rough, he said after. Career-wise, I know. Pension might not make it through. Vivian will fight for it, Diana said. And I'll testify to your character in whatever process requires it. He let out a slow breath. The kind that carries something out with it. 26 years, he said, mostly to himself. 26 years of showing up off before 1 year of not, Diana said. That's the complete record. It all belongs in there. The reinstatement offer came on a Wednesday, formal letter, department letterhead. The language careful and generous, in the specific way of documents written by people who need something resolved, without acknowledging what it needs to be resolved from. Diana read it once, called Vivian. They want quiet, Vivian said, standard return, no formal acknowledgement the suspension was retaliatory, no written apology, no admission of any kind, no assumed. Vivian moved directly to terms, formal retraction of the suspension notation from your personnel file. Written acknowledgement that your conduct was consistent with your rights as a private citizen. Departmental policy review of side employment arrangements. And the reform city seat in writing confirmed before you return to the building. All 4, nothing partial. They'll push back on the written acknowledgement. They'll push back and then they'll agree, Vivian said. 'Cause a second story about the terms of your reinstatement is not a headline anyone in that building wants to generate right now. Get all 4 in writing, Diana said. That's the line. 2 days later, she had all 4. She walked back into the Caldwell Police Department on a Monday morning. No ceremony. She had declined when it was offered. Just her badge, returned by the administrative captain who handled these transitions, and who wore the expression of someone determined to be professional about a situation he would have strongly preferred not to be part of. Diana clipped the badge to her jacket, walked down the corridor to her office, sat at her desk. Someone had left coffee on the corner, still hot, and she didn't know who and didn't ask. She drank it and pulled up the backlog of reports that had accumulated and started reading from the beginning. She was midway through the third report when her door opened. Devon stood in the doorway, holding a paper bag and wearing the expression of a person who has correctly predicted how something was going to go and is being disciplined about not saying so. "How did you get in here?" Diana said. Told the desk officer, "I was your nephew." He set the bag on her desk with the ease of someone who had been doing this for years. He said, "Oh, the kid with the video," waved me right through. "Devon, this is a working police precinct. Turkey and the avocado one you like." He sat down in the chair across from her without waiting to be invited, which was not new behavior. "How's the first Thursday?" She looked around her office, the desk she'd worked at for 4 years, the window overlooking the parking lot, not a beautiful view, just at hers. "Fine," she said. Fine meaning good or fine meaning you haven't decided yet. Fine meaning I have a significant backlog and someone let my nephew walk unchallenged into a secured facility. Devon unwrapped his sandwich, entirely unbothered by this characterization. "So I've been thinking," he said. "We never finished the original errand." She looked at him. "The bracelet," he said. "We went to the mall for a bracelet. We left without a bracelet, I remember. New management at Sterling and Company." He said it with the careful neutrality of someone who had been rehearsing the approach. "New staff. D.A. Holt's office cleared the location under new ownership last week. I looked it up. You looked it up. I look things up." He met her eyes. 2 o'clock, I'll drive." Diana regarded him for a moment. "Fine," she said. Devon's face did the small thing it did when he'd been right about something and was successfully not making a production of it. He finished his sandwich, left the second one on her desk, stood up and left. Diana picked up the sandwich, went back to her reports. For the first time in a long time, sitting at her desk on an ordinary Monday morning felt like exactly what it was. Just work, just hers, just normal. They went on Saturday. Devon drove. She let him without arguing about it, which seemed to surprise him slightly. The November light had flattened into the gray that comes in the second half of the month, the kind of light that makes everything look ordinary. She needed it to look ordinary. The mall was busy with the comfortable busy of a Saturday. Families and strollers and teenagers moving at the pace of some people with nowhere particular to be. Diana walked through the main entrance with her good leather bag on her shoulder. The same bag. She hadn't thought about leaving it at home. Hadn't considered whether it would be read as something it wasn't. Hadn't run the calculation she'd spent 6 weeks running automatically every time she walked into any store anywhere. She noticed on the escalator going up that she hadn't thought about it. She decided that was worth something, small and real, and worth something. The Seuss Sidenissen, same citation, same glass front, different name above the door. Meridian. Clean and simple. The window display was arranged similarly to what she remembered. Small spotlights on each piece. Nothing overdone. Inside, a young woman looked up and said, "Let me know if you need anything," and went back to what she was doing without hovering. Diana went to the bracelet case. Devon came up beside her a moment later. "That one," he said, pointing without hesitation at a silver bracelet with a small open circle charm. The tag said it represented completion. It was right, simple enough for every day, specific enough to mean something when you knew the reason for it. The staff member came over without being called, unlocked the case, set the tray on the counter without commentary. Diana picked up the bracelet, held it in the light. She thought about Devon making the dean's list and texting her 3 words on a Saturday morning. She thought about a 21-year-old sitting on a bench watching a game with his phone pointed at a storefront for no reason in particular and every reason that mattered. She thought about 6 weeks of carrying something and finally putting it down in the right place. "I'll take it," she said. 4 minutes. Start to finish, 4 minutes. The staff member wrapped it in tissue, placed it in a small bag, thanked them genuinely, and that was all. 4 minutes of ordinary. They rode the escalator down without speaking. Devon had his hands in his pockets. Diana held the small bag. At the bottom, Devon said quietly, "Dee Dee." "Yes, I'm glad we came back. She looked at the mall around them. The Saturday afternoon of it. Someone's kid running ahead and getting called back. The two old men on the bench near the fountain, still there, still in what appeared to be the same conversation, showing no signs of concluding. So am I, she said. They walked to the exit. Devon held the door. She stepped through into the parking structure, the cold air and the hum of ventilation and traffic beyond the walls. Next time, Devon said, falling into step beside her, we could just order online. It would be significantly less complicated. Diana kept walking. No, she said. No, we go where we want to go. She kept her pace steady. We buy what we want to buy. We walk where we want to walk. She glanced at him. That doesn't change. Devon was quiet for a moment, thinking the way he thought best, which was while moving, even when it's hard. Especially then, she said. That's the whole point of all of it. They reached the car, got in. Devon started the engine and pulled toward the exit ramp without rushing. The daylight came in as they reached the top, wide gray sky above the city. Completely ordinary, exactly right. Her phone buzzed 20 minutes after he dropped her off. Devon, one text, she cried when she opened it. In a good way, thought you should know. Diana read it, standing in her kitchen, still in her coat. She read it again. She took her coat off, hung it, set her good leather bag on the counter beside her keys, walked to the side table by the door, picked up the badge, held it a moment, the weight of it exactly what it had always been. Not heavier, not lighter, the same. She put it back down, made coffee, drank it while it was still hot, standing at the counter in the quiet of a Saturday evening with the city carrying on outside and nothing asking anything of her. She thought about what the badge was supposed to mean. She'd been carrying that question for 6 weeks, had turned it over in the dark, at her kitchen table, in her car outside Vivian's building, standing at the side table in the middle of the night. Here was what she'd arrived at. The badge was supposed to mean you showed up for people. All of them. Not just the ones who made it easy. And when the system around you stopped doing that, when it started moving in the other direction, the badge was supposed to mean you said so, even when saying so cost you, especially then. She had always known that. She just needed 6 weeks and a bracelet and a 21-year-old with a phone in the right angle to remember that she'd always known it. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, looked out the window at the street. An ordinary Saturday evening on Clement Street. Yeah, it was dodging its loop of the yard. A light on in the house across the way. Someone walking a stroller past the street lamp at the corner. The sound of people going about their lives. One of the sounds she had always liked best. It was enough.